Have you ever felt like the more available you are, the more they pull away? You give your best, stay patient, keep showing up, and somehow it just makes them colder, more distant, more detached? You start to wonder, am I asking for too much? Should I tone it down? Maybe I just need to give them more space. And before you know it, you're bending, shrinking, and slowly disconnecting from yourself, all just to stay connected to someone who never fully shows up. Hey, I'm Jim Rohn, and in this video, we're going to talk about the exact moment everything shifts in your dynamic with an avoidant partner, and why the turning point is not when they change, but when you stop being so available to their emotional inconsistency. Because here's the truth. As long as you keep making space for their avoidance, they have no reason to meet you anywhere closer. But the second you reclaim your emotional energy, not in anger, not to manipulate, but from a place of clarity and calm self-respect, everything changes. Avoidants don't wake up because you explain more. They shift when the cycle breaks. And that break begins with you, when you no longer hand over your time, your peace, and your worth to someone who keeps offering crumbs in return. If you've ever felt stuck in a push-pull loop, or exhausted from trying to prove your value to someone who can't fully receive it, this video is for you. Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll not only understand what's really going on underneath their emotional withdrawal, you'll also learn how to step out of the cycle without losing yourself in the process. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because healing starts when clarity begins. Let's dive in. Here's the thing most people miss. Avoidants fear closeness, but they crave it too. They want connection, but only on their terms. When it feels safe, when it doesn't ask too much, when it doesn't stretch them emotionally. So as long as you're always there, always emotionally available, always the one holding space, they never have to grow. They get the comfort of your presence without ever having to step into real vulnerability. But everything starts to shift the moment you stop being their emotional safety net. Not because you're angry, not to play games, but because you finally recognize that your emotional energy is valuable and it deserves to be met, not left hanging in confusion. When you step back, they feel the change. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in the quiet, unfamiliar space where your constant reassurance used to live. Suddenly they're left with the part of themselves they've spent years avoiding. You're no longer cushioning their indecision, and that's a game changer. Some avoidants will feel this and begin to reflect, others will disappear. Either way you win, because you've stopped giving to someone who treated your presence like a given, not a gift. In the space you've created, there's room for someone new, someone who chooses you clearly, not cautiously. Avoidant partners often operate from a polished emotional front. They seem self-sufficient, grounded, even emotionally chill. But underneath that exterior is often a deep fear of intimacy. And at first, that's hard to see. In the beginning, they're charming, curious, open even. They'll show you just enough vulnerability to hook you in, to give you hope. But when the relationship starts asking for more, consistency, emotional presence, true partnership, they begin to retreat, not always dramatically. It might look like slow replies, canceled plans, or a subtle avoidance of real conversations. And if you're emotionally invested, you might start making excuses for them. You'll tell yourself they're just overwhelmed or they've been through a lot. And while that may be true, the deeper truth is this: their pattern creates emotional instability. You find yourself walking on eggshells, carefully managing your words, your timing, your needs, trying to show them that you're safe, that they don't have to run. But here's the reality. No matter how gentle you are, you can't do the work of trust for someone else. Avoidant attachment often begins in childhood, usually in homes where emotional closeness felt unsafe, inconsistent, or conditional. So as adults, these individuals protect themselves by limiting emotional exposure. Even when they care, they tend to keep a part of themselves tucked away, behind walls they've built not out of cruelty, but out of fear. And here's the heartbreaking contradiction. They long for love, but fear what love demands. Closeness feels like a threat, like the risk of being controlled, rejected, overwhelmed, or judged. So they hold people just far enough away, even as they quietly wish someone would come closer. If you have a secure or anxious attachment style, this behavior might leave you confused. You find yourself wondering, why won't they let me in? What did I do wrong? But the truth is, it's not about you. It's about their internal wiring, shaped by wounds they've never fully looked at. Instead of processing those fears, they retreat. And that retreat creates a dynamic where you end up doing all the work. The more you reach for connection, the more they feel smothered. What you see as love, they interpret as pressure. And the harder you try, the more distant they become. Without realizing it, you fall into a pattern where your efforts, no matter how loving, begin to feel threatening to them. You're caught in a loop where your need for closeness triggers their need for space. Over time, this emotional mismatch can erode your self-worth. You begin to question your value, wondering why it feels so one-sided. But it's not, because your love is flawed. Your consistency, your devotion, those are beautiful qualities. But in this dynamic, they often go unseen. When there are no consequences for emotional distance, the avoidant partner has no reason to change. If they can withdraw, delay, and disconnect without anything shifting in the relationship, why would they grow? That's the quiet cost of always being available. It teaches them they don't have to meet you in the middle, because you'll always meet them where they are. The truth is, emotional avoidance serves them, at least temporarily. It allows them to hold on to a sense of control and independence while still reaping the benefits of emotional connection, thanks to your effort. You're doing all the emotional heavy lifting. You're the one reaching out, making space, managing the relationship's emotional tone, while they stay at a comfortable distance. There's no need for them to grow or come closer, because you're always the one bridging the gap. And slowly, something begins to shift. You start to feel the imbalance. You notice you're overthinking every text. You're the one starting most conversations. You're creating emotional room for them, but rarely receiving the same in return. The relationship quietly begins to orbit around their comfort, their timeline, their emotional availability, and because avoidants often struggle to recognize their own relational patterns, they rarely see how much they're leaning on your effort just to keep things going. They don't realize that your constant availability is masking the deeper instability in the relationship. Every time you show up without reciprocity, the message being sent, without you meaning to, is this: your emotional distance is okay with me. Not only does this fail to challenge their avoidant tendencies, it reinforces a dynamic where you have to suppress your own needs just to keep the peace. You tolerate the inconsistency, hoping your loyalty might eventually inspire them to change. But here's the hard truth: nothing interrupts avoidance like healthy distance. Not guilt, not persuasion, not pressure, just space. Calm, consistent, self-respecting space. Because in that space, they're finally left with the discomfort they've been protecting themselves from. And only then can real growth or real clarity begin. When you finally step back, something important happens. They're forced to sit with the very discomfort they've spent so long avoiding. That silence you once filled with reassurance, effort, and emotional labor, it now echoes. And in that quiet space, they face a real choice: come closer or let go. But that choice can only exist when you stop showing up on their behalf. Because as long as you keep bridging the emotional gap, they never have to. That constant availability teaches them, even unintentionally, that they don't actually need to show up fully, because you'll keep doing it for both of you. And let me be clear, stepping back from someone who avoids intimacy isn't manipulation. It's not a tactic, it's an act of self-respect. There's a huge difference between creating distance to protect your emotional health versus using it to get a reaction. When someone consistently resists closeness and you continue showing up without boundaries, that's not strength, that's self-abandonment. And eventually, the cost of always being emotionally available to someone who fears intimacy becomes too heavy to carry. It erodes your self-worth, your clarity, your peace. Choosing distance isn't about punishment, it's about preservation. It's what happens when you've done the work, given your heart, adjusted your expectations, and held space for someone who keeps keeping you out. It's easy to believe that just one more kind gesture, one more attempt to prove your loyalty will finally open them up. But avoidance isn't softened by kindness, it's interrupted by truth. And sometimes the most powerful wake-up call you can offer someone is the quiet, steady absence of your effort. Not out of coldness, not out of resentment, but from a calm decision to no longer overextend yourself in a one-sided dynamic. And here's what matters most. Avoidants don't respond well to emotional pressure. The more they sense intensity or expectation, the more they retreat. But if you step back with grace, no blame, no drama, no ultimatums, you shift the entire dynamic. You stop feeding the pattern. And in that space, for the first time, they have to decide whether to meet you or finally face the cost of their distance. When you step back, something subtle but powerful shifts. You take away the emotional safety net they've quietly relied on. And instead of reacting to your needs or retreating in response to your closeness, they're left with a space they're not used to. That space can feel foreign, even uncomfortable. But that discomfort is often the very thing that sparks awareness, because for the first time, no one's rescuing them from the impact of their emotional distance. Stepping back also shifts the spotlight inward, back onto your needs, your boundaries, your growth. You stop measuring your worth by how much you can tolerate. You start honoring what you actually deserve. And that energetic shift, it speaks volumes. Without a single word, it says your presence is not automatic. Your emotional availability is not a given, and intimacy must be built, not assumed. You're no longer willing to stay in a connection that leaves you half seen, half held. This isn't about withholding love, it's about giving it to yourself first. Because when you lead with self-respect, you stop chasing people who can't meet you where you stand. You stop explaining your worth and start creating space for someone who never needed convincing. Your absence speaks in a language that your constant presence never could. And for the avoidant, that shift is not just noticeable, it's destabilizing. They were used to your availability. You were the one starting conversations, offering emotional support, holding it all together. And in doing so, you made it easier for them to stay emotionally distant without ever facing the consequences. But now, you're not showing up the way you used to. You've left a gap, and in that gap, they're forced to feel what they've been avoiding all along. Accountability. Avoidants often retreat when things get emotionally intense. It's not always conscious. It's often reflex. Pull back. Protect. Avoid expectations, vulnerability, closeness. But when someone's always there, patient, forgiving, dependable, they never have to confront that reflex. Your consistent presence made their behavior livable, comfortable, unexamined. But when you remove that presence, the story changes. The pattern gets interrupted, and that's when real clarity begins. Suddenly, you're no longer the one replying right away. You're not rushing in to patch up every awkward silence or rescue the conversation from drifting. You're not suggesting the next plan, trying to keep the connection alive. And what used to be their tool, silence, starts to feel uncomfortable, even disorienting, because something has changed. Now there's an emotional mirror in place. When you stop cushioning the emotional consequences of their distance, they're left to feel the full impact of their own behavior. This moment isn't about proving your worth. It's about letting their actions reflect back at them, without you doing the emotional translation. It's not about giving them the answers. It's about giving space for the truth to surface. Some avoidance will pull back further when that space opens up. Others, though, might pause and start to reflect. They may reach out, not out of pressure, but out of recognition. Either way, you're no longer stuck in confusion. You're gaining clarity, not through confrontation, but through absence. Your distance becomes the test they didn't expect. And in that space, the truth becomes visible. Are they truly capable or even willing to meet you emotionally? That clarity is everything. It pulls you out of a cycle of guessing, chasing, and hoping. You stop living in emotional limbo. Because here's the reality. Someone who values you won't let your absence be met with silence. They'll respond, not perfectly, but sincerely, with effort, with care. That's the moment where the difference becomes clear. There's a vast difference between someone who misses the comfort you gave them and someone who genuinely misses you. One wants relief, the other wants relationship. The right person doesn't leave you begging for clarity. They don't make you decode their every shift or earn your place. When someone is emotionally available and truly ready for real connection, they'll show up in a steady, grounded way, not because they're flawless, but because they want to. You won't have to fight for attention or twist yourself into someone more digestible. You won't have to walk on eggshells or overanalyze every interaction. Instead, you'll feel calm. You'll feel seen. You'll feel chosen. Not conditionally, but consistently. And if you've been entangled with someone avoidant for long enough, that kind of emotional safety might feel unfamiliar at first. You've learned to equate love with effort, with proving, with chasing. You've learned to normalize inconsistency and tolerate emotional ambiguity. But here's the truth. Love should not feel like pursuit. The right person won't need to be chased. They'll show up, they'll communicate, and they'll want to understand you. Not run from the parts of connection that require vulnerability, but lean into them with you. In a healthy connection, your needs aren't treated like a burden. You're not asked to dim your light to be accepted or to shrink your emotional truth just to keep the peace. The right person won't make you feel ashamed for wanting closeness. They'll welcome it because they want it too. They understand that intimacy isn't built in fleeting moments of chemistry or charm. It's built in the steady, quiet consistency of being there for one another. Through honest conversations, mutual effort, and showing up. Not just when it's easy, but especially when it's uncomfortable. When someone has done the inner work to feel safe being seen, they won't fear letting you in. If you've ever been with someone who pulled away every time things got real, it's easy to believe that you're the problem, that you're too much, too needy, too intense. But the truth? You're not too much. You were simply offering your heart to someone who didn't have the emotional capacity to receive it. And when you finally stop fighting for scraps of attention, when you stop chasing and overgiving, something powerful happens. You start waiting for someone who meets you where you are. Someone who brings clarity, not confusion. Someone who doesn't make you question your worth because they see it from the beginning. This shift changes everything. It's not about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone emotionally available. And once you experience that difference, you won't want to go back to second-guessing, performing, or hoping to be chosen. Because the right person doesn't need convincing. They choose you freely. So if you've been caught in a loop with someone who keeps you at arm's length, someone who gives just enough to keep your hope alive, but never enough to build something real, maybe it's time to remember your value. You don't have to audition for love. You don't need to overextend just to earn someone's attention. When you stop chasing, stop over-delivering, stop holding emotional space for someone who won't meet you halfway, you step into your power. And in doing so, you send a clear message not just to them, but to yourself. My love isn't a consolation prize, it's a gift. And it belongs with someone who's ready to hold it fully. The moment you stop showing up for someone who avoids real connection, everything begins to shift. Not because you're playing games, but because you've started living by new rules. Rules where you stop abandoning yourself in the name of being chosen. From there, love becomes less about proving and more about aligning. Less about surviving emotional distance and more about building emotional closeness. So protect your energy, trust your gut, and remember this: the right person for you, they won't need to be chased. So if there's one truth I hope you take away from this, it's this: you are not too much for the right person. Your desire for connection, for emotional closeness, for mutual effort, that's not a flaw. That's the foundation of real intimacy. And when you stop chasing someone who can't meet you, you start making space for someone who can. Someone who shows up not because they have to, but because they want to. You don't need to shrink yourself to be loved. You don't need to carry the entire relationship on your shoulders. The right connection feels like safety, not confusion, like being chosen, not questioned. And it begins when you choose you first. Thank you so much for being here and watching. Until the end, if this message resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your story, your reflections, or just one insight that stood out to you. You never know who else it might help. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We're creating a space for honest conversations, healing, and emotional growth. And I'd love for you to be part of it. Until next time, protect your peace, trust your worth, and never settle for less than the love you're willing to give. You deserve that and more.